Hey everybody, it's Akil Aline again, and I just wanted to share with you quickly an experience I had that was just absolutely fantastic. I got to attend a number of events that were part of the Montreal International Black Film Festival. This is my first year attending the festival, but this is the year that I was able to attend more screenings of specific films than ever before. 4 years ago, I was able to cover the opening of the festival in 2018 when Spike Lee was the guest of honor, not for the first time. On Wednesday night, the 14th Montreal International Black Film Festival was graced with the presence of the legendary filmmaker Spike Lee. And now I was really glad to be able to attend this year's festival last week, especially the opening night, the opening film, Rickey Jackson, which is a documentary about a case I hadn't even heard of. This is the case of exonerated former inmate Rickey Jackson, a black man, although he was just a boy when he was first incarcerated back in the 70s for a crime he did not commit based on just the absolute flimsiest evidence. In fact, I'm not sure it can even be dignified with the word evidence, because the only evidence they actually even bothered to present against him at trial was a clearly coerced and bogus confession from a 12-year-old black boy from his neighborhood in Ohio, who, under duress and pressure from local police detectives, falsely claimed that Rickey Jackson had been responsible for shooting a store clerk, or rather, I think a bank clerk, dead outside of a store in his hometown, as well as badly wounding another bystander.
For the first time, those of us who are true crime documentary fans, this documentary is totally different from all of those others we've been used to. It has a feature film effect, graphics, special effects. I mean, it just takes you on a roller coaster ride.
Having gone to law school as well as university in the United States, having studied constitutional law issues, including issues of criminal procedure while I was there, I really was struck by a lot of the omissions, frankly, from the documentary, because there were such gaping holes in the case against Rickey Jackson that it was absolutely outrageous that it took 39 years to spring him from prison for a crime he clearly did not commit. And of course, it's an outrage that the real perpetrator of the crime is still walking free somewhere out there, assuming he's still alive. When you consider that, again, a clearly bogus, coerced confession of a 12-year-old boy who initially said he wasn't sure who had committed the shooting was the only evidence actually presented against him.
I couldn't see
You
it.
go to jail for perjury. 12 years old. I don't know what perjury means. I wanted my mother so bad.
Come on, you know everybody in this neighborhood, don't you? What'd you see? You saw all 3 shots? Was it like bang, bang, bang?
Yeah,
I had nobody.
Is that it?
Should I not?
There's a car there, right? Green car?
Yeah.
Yes.
You're doing good, Eddie. Next to the green car, did you see who
Should I
who
come
shot?
Should I come?
Come on, Eddie, I just need a name.
Should I not? Should I?
Not good enough.
See, I don't know.
Who pulled the trigger? Eddie, you know who it was. Who killed Harold Franks? Who? Who killed Harold Franks?
Rickey Jackson.
Here, sign this.
I had to wonder the whole way through. No eyewitness testimony other than this bogus confession from this young boy who was clearly pressured by the cops, even though another woman, a black woman at that, who was shot by the real perpetrator outside this store, but survived her wounds. She didn't say anything at trial or at any point in the course of the police investigation that might have exonerated Rickey Jackson from the beginning. What about the defense that he had? What kind of quality of a defense did he benefit from? That was the question that I made sure to ask during the Q&A session that followed the screening of the documentary, and we were blessed to be able to have Rickey Jackson himself speak to us via Zoom online link up with the director of the documentary sitting on the stage in front of the screen where we saw Rickey Jackson's face. I made sure to ask, what about the defense? I mean, I understand that public defenders in the United States in particular tend to be overworked, underpaid, and just generally so stressed out that they often can't give their clients, at least not all of their clients, the kind of effective assistance of counsel that the United States Constitution actually guarantees them. I got a little pocket copy of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States of America. It says, in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law, and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, to be confronted with the witnesses against him, to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. The Supreme Court over the decades has interpreted that to mean the effective assistance of counsel, but it sets a pretty high bar for determining how shoddy a criminal defendant's defense has to have been in order for courts to conclude that they did not benefit from the effective assistance of counsel, and therefore the original conviction at the original trial has to be vacated and maybe ordered for a new trial. So with such flimsy evidence, again, if it even deserves to be called evidence, when the prosecution just hung its hat on one bogus confession based on eyewitness testimony, which even when it's not coerced is the most unreliable form of evidence, how could even the most incompetent of defense teams have dropped the ball on this? And I asked Rickey Jackson that question, and he was able to tell me that he really didn't benefit from a quality defense because we had limited time, and he himself was being sort of recuperating from a COVID infection and was in an isolation at the time. I didn't want to press him to give too many details, and he wasn't able to spend too much time delving into it in too much detail. But that was one of the really gaping holes that I saw in this fiasco. I highly recommend that anyone out there who has the opportunity take time to see this documentary because it's an amazing watch, but be prepared. It's definitely one of those watches that's really frustrating. Sort of like When They See Us, the recent series about the Central Park 5 or Exonerated 5 if you prefer.
For the first time, it gives you hands-on feel to what it's like to serve time for a crime you didn't commit. I mean, you really get immersed in this film and you get an opportunity to see what it was like for me and feel some of the emotions that I went through. And trust me, you definitely are going to feel something. If you don't, you're not human.
Apparently, one of the reasons he was ultimately acquitted is because eventually the young boy whose bogus confession put him away in the first place was eventually persuaded to come forward a few years ago and testify in court that in reality his original confession was not authentic. I mean, there was so many outrageous holes in this whole case. And while he was in prison, his mother passed away. He fell out of touch with his family, who stopped coming to visit him in prison. I think a few years after he was incarcerated, he was offered a chance to get paroled a number of times. But in order to be paroled, you have to admit that you did what they accused you of doing, what you were convicted of doing, and accept responsibility for it. He refused to, at any point in the whole fiasco, dating all the way back to the mid-70s when it first happened, he refused to cop to a crime he knew he never committed. Because of that, he was denied parole again and again and again. And I had to give enough props to this brother for sticking to his guns, if you'll pardon the expression, and, standing his ground and just never, ever giving a false confession, because there have been so many other cases, including the Central Park jogger case, where innocent people, particularly disproportionately innocent young black men, have been convicted, wrongfully convicted, falsely convicted of crimes they did not commit because they were bamboozled, essentially, by police into giving false confessions, thinking that it would somehow lighten the burden on them, or even just bring a long and torturous interrogation to an end. But that didn't even happen in this case, and the evidence was even flimsier in this case than it was in the Central Park case, and yet he ended up being the longest incarcerated wrongful convict in at least recent American history, as far as we know of right now. So it's just a really strong cautionary tale about the justice system and how it works, the flaws in it, the many flaws in it, the biases in it. It teaches some important lessons about what to do if you get jammed up for a crime you know you didn't commit. Never give a false confession, no matter how heavy and insurmountable the evidence against you seems to be. Never allow the cops to interrogate you without a lawyer present. Always invoke your right to counsel, even if you can't afford a highly skilled criminal lawyer from private practice who can give you a really, the best defense money can buy. Even if all you can get is an overworked, underpaid, stressed out public defender. Even mediocre legal representation is better than absolutely none. Even the most incompetent or most under-resourced public defender will still be able to prevent the cops from tricking you or getting you to incriminate yourself by accident and things of that nature. One mistake that Rickey Jackson did make, if I'm not mistaken, from watching the movie, is that he didn't ask for a lawyer during his hours-long interrogation from the very beginning. Because if he'd had a lawyer there with him from the beginning, not just later on at trial, but during the interrogation, they might have been able to point out, well, if all you've got against him is this BS confession, I mean, to my way of thinking, this shouldn't even have made it to trial. Nowadays, I'm not sure that it would have. I'd like to think it wouldn't have. But anyway, those are some of the lessons to be learned from a story like this. I'm really glad I was able to attend this event this year. And by all means, folks, definitely see this documentary if you do get the opportunity.
This movie just reaches down and touches that something in all of us.
You'll learn something. As much reading as I've done on this subject over the years, as much as I've earned a law degree in the United States and read up on this subject and studied it, I still hadn't heard of this story until now. Until last week, that is, when I saw this documentary. So there's always more to learn in this area, and there are always valuable lessons to be gleaned from it that all of us hopefully won't have to apply in our own lives one day, but you never know. Especially if black skin is the skin that you're in.